She hadn't spoken to anyone in 3 days. The kettle clicked off, but she didn't move. The tea bag sat cold in the chipped mug beside a pile of crumpled tissues and a tablet screen glowing with hatred. Her face, pale, caught mid-laugh, in a badly cropped freeze frame was plastered on every trending feed. Beneath it, a headline twisted her words. Beloved author says kids these days are emotionally lazy. She never said that, not even close. But the internet didn't care. Neither did the morning shows or the mums groups or the furious TikTok think pieces. Upstairs, her agent's voicemails stacked up. Damage control. Public apology. Maybe take a break from social. But downstairs, the doorbell rang. Not once, then again, then a third time. And outside on her stoop sat a cardboard box wrapped in blue duct tape with a crayon drawing of a girl and a fox. No return address. Just 4 words scribbled in marker. You saved me once. She almost didn't open it. But what happens next will unravel everything she thought she knew about her work, her readers, and herself. The ending. You won't believe what finally sets her free. She didn't leave the house anymore. The blinds stayed half closed, casting long slats of shadow over the cluttered living room. Dust curled in the light. A leaning tower of unread books teetered on the edge of the coffee table. Empty soup cans, cold teacups, unopened mail. Her cat Oatmeal lay curled in a shoebox that once held a pair of boots she never wore. Her name was Lark Addison, or at least that was her pen name. To most of the world she was just Lark, the eccentric recluse who'd created The Fox and the Falling Tree, a children's book. So beloved it once outsold The Giving Tree for a year straight. It had been a quiet revolution told in watercolor illustrations and spare poetic prose. Children memorized it. Therapists recommended it. Grieving parents clung to it like scripture. But now she was a joke. The interview was meant to be a rare, gentle reintroduction. One of those puff-piece podcast episodes for retired readers to rediscover her. The host was young, bubbly, eager. Maybe too eager. They'd asked, do you think kids are emotionally more fragile today? And she had said something like, I think children are carrying more than they're allowed to show. Sometimes they express it differently, maybe through silence or sarcasm or defiance. But it had been chopped, edited, rearranged, then retweeted with a headline she never approved. Now the internet thought she'd called an entire generation weak. The video blew up overnight. By morning, her Wikipedia page had been vandalized. Old fans denounced her. People posted video essays tearing apart her legacy. One parent burned a copy of her book live on TikTok. She read all of it. At first, she'd drafted a long explanation. Then she deleted it. Then another. Each time her hand shook a little more. By day 3, she'd stopped replying to her agent's messages altogether. By day 4, she unplugged the landline. And on day 5 this day, she found herself curled on the floor, oatmeal pressed against her ribs, listening to the kettle boil in another room, too tired to pour a cup. That's when the doorbell rang. She flinched. It rang again. She wasn't expecting anyone. No one came here. She hadn't done a signing in 7 years. She hadn't used her real name, Melanie Claire Rowe, in 12. No address tied her to Lark Addison. Not publicly. And yet, something made her get up. Not quickly, but with that sluggish, ghost-like instinct that loneliness breeds. She opened the door. No one there. Just the box. Plain cardboard sealed with blue duct tape. On the top, in one child's earnest scrawl, was a marker drawing a brown-haired girl standing next to a red fox, both smiling beneath a lopsided moon. The label read, To Lark Addison. Thank you for the falling tree. She stood there barefoot, the edge of the winter wind curling around her ankles. She looked up and down the street, but it was empty. A leaf skittered past. No car pulled away, no footsteps. Inside, she set the box on the table, still staring at it like it might explode. She reached for scissors, then stopped. She didn't want to see whatever was inside. Didn't want some twisted fan mail full of accusations or thinly veiled pity. Her mind buzzed with 100 imagined outcomes, each worse than the last. But then she noticed something. The weight of the box wasn't paperbacks or merchandise. It was soft. She opened it. The top layer was loose-leaf paper. Dozens of folded sheets, crayon drawings, and colored envelopes. Beneath that more. Hundreds, it seemed. Small fingers had clumsily taped hearts to corners, doodled foxtails, drawn forests with oversized moons. Some were messy stained, others carefully printed. She picked up the first. Dear Lark, when my mum went to heaven, I didn't want to talk anymore. But then I read about the fox who couldn't find its voice. I think you made that book for me. Now I write poems. Thank you. Love, Jasmine, age 9. She blinked. Her breath caught in her throat. She picked up another. I have scary dreams sometimes, but I draw the tree from your book and hide under it in my mind. My counselor says that's called a safe place. You made it. Thank you. Another? You don't know me, but I used to cut myself. I'm older now. 17. The book about the fox is still by my bed. You helped. That's all. She sank into the couch, the letters slipping across her lap like leaves in wind. The tears came slowly, not in a dramatic movie-like sob, just silent streaks at first. A breath hitching, a sound in her chest she hadn't heard in years. Then a choking laugh, then a cry that curled her body inward. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the room was littered with opened letters, drawings, and envelopes. The table was buried, the couch cushions covered. The floor looked like a second-grade art class had exploded. She didn't eat, didn't drink, just read. Some were one-liners, others full-page essays. Some were illegible scribbles with only a name, Leo, age 6. One simply said, "You help me not die." At midnight, Oatmeal climbed onto her shoulder and meowed softly. She whispered, "I didn't know. I didn't know." And it wasn't clear if she meant the damage the article had done or the love her book had quietly carried all these years. When the box was finally empty, something at the very bottom caught her eye. A smaller envelope, thicker paper, no drawing. Just her real name, Melanie Rowe, written in cursive. She froze. Only one person used to call her that. She opened it. Inside was a single typed line. "It's been a long time, Mel. Thought you might need to remember what you gave the world." Ah. Her breath stopped. Only one person signed letters like that. Ah. Rowan, her childhood best friend. The one who had helped her come up with the Fox character years before she was ever published. The one who disappeared after the book's success. They hadn't spoken since 2011. The letter slipped from her hands. Memories began to rise. Of laughter in libraries, of fights in cafes, of one winter kiss that neither of them ever talked about again. She reached for her phone, then stopped. She wasn't ready. But the next morning, she opened her laptop and started typing. The blinking cursor on her screen felt like a heartbeat. For hours, she just stared at it. Her fingers hovered over the keys unmoving like she was waiting for permission from something she couldn't name. The house remained silent except for the occasional creak of old wood or the soft shuffle of Oatmeal repositioning himself on the windowsill. Morning light began to filter through the half-shut blinds, drawing pale rectangles across the clutter. She hadn't written anything in 3 years. Not a story, not a blog post, not even a journal entry. The last manuscript she'd attempted had withered after 20 pages, its characters flat, its heart hollow. But something was shifting now. A pressure building. Not from guilt, not from the scandal, but from the weight of 200 children's voices saying, "You mattered to me." She didn't know what this new story would be about. Not yet. But it had to begin with the truth. Her real name? She opened a blank document and typed, "By Melanie Claire Rowe." And just like that, the air felt lighter. She didn't notice she was crying again until the tears dripped onto the keys. 3 days later, Rowan knocked on her door. She didn't open it right away. She'd seen the figure through the peephole, a tall, slightly older woman now, with grey streaks in her thick black curls, wearing a coat that looked too warm for spring. She held a paper bag in one hand, her face tentative, not angry, not smug, just quiet. Melanie finally opened the door. Rowan gave her a small, crooked smile. "I brought sandwiches and soup. Figured you'd stopped eating again." Melanie's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her throat locked up. Rowan stepped inside anyway, brushing past gently. She placed the bag on the kitchen counter like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your place still smells like eucalyptus and anxiety," she said. That broke something. Melanie laughed. It came out like a cough. You sent the letters. Rowan nodded. Not all of them. Just made the call. To who? To everyone I could find. Therapists, teachers, librarians, Reddit. You'd be surprised how many people wanted to write you once they found out where to send it. Melanie leaned against the counter. Her knees trembled. Why, she whispered, after all this time. Rowan looked at her, and for a moment there was something almost raw in her gaze. Because I was one of them, she said softly. One of the people you saved. They sat in the living room, eating lentil soup out of mismatched mugs, surrounded by letters and crayon drawings. I always thought you resented me, Melanie said. After the book deal, after I ran off with the publisher's agent, after I changed my name. Rowan didn't speak right away. She spooned soup carefully, blew on it, took a slow sip. I did, she admitted, for a while, because I took the story. No, Rowan said, meeting her eyes. Because you left me out of your story. Melanie closed her eyes. Shame flushed her cheeks. It was supposed to protect you, she whispered. I thought if I disappeared, if I didn't drag you into the mess, you'd be free. You don't protect someone by erasing them. The words hit hard, but there was no venom in Rowan's tone. Just tired honesty. They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that only exists between people who once knew everything about each other. I didn't think anyone would remember me without Lark Addison, Melanie finally said. I thought if that name died, I died with it. Rowan reached into the pile of letters and pulled one out at random. She read aloud. Dear Lark, my dad went to jail last year. I didn't talk to anyone about it until I read your book. The Fox said it's okay to feel lost. I still feel lost, but not alone. Thank you. She looked up. Does that sound like someone who only matters under a fake name? Melanie covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. Rowan didn't say anything, just leaned back and let the silence speak. Later, they sat outside on the back porch. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with lavender streaks. Oatmeal prowled the yard, chasing invisible prey. Rowan sipped her tea. Melanie cradled a fresh stack of envelopes they hadn't yet opened. There's a girl who drew a comic strip, Rowan said, pointing at one. The Fox goes to therapy. Melanie chuckled. I always imagined he should. A pause. Did you ever think, Rowan said carefully, that maybe you needed to go too? Melanie didn't answer. The wind stirred. Somewhere a wind chime tinkled. I'm not asking to reopen old wounds, Rowan added. I just want you to write again. Not because the world wants it, but because you do. Melanie looked down at the letters in her lap. Her eyes lingered on a drawing, just a tree with a single leaf falling surrounded by stars. I think I already started, she murmured. That night, Rowan stayed over. Not in the same room, not yet, but they shared the same roof again for the first time in years. Melanie sat up writing until almost 3 a.m. This wasn't The Fox and the Falling Tree too. This wasn't a sequel. It was something new. She didn't plan it, didn't outline it. It just came. It was about a girl with no name who hid her voice in other people's stories until one day the children she'd once comforted came back and gave her a voice of her own. It wasn't a children's book. It wasn't quite for adults either. It was for the ones in between, the ones who never quite stopped needing stories to survive. And this time it began with her own name, Melanie Claire Rowe, the girl who thought she'd been erased only to find she'd been written into more hearts than she'd ever dared imagine. The morning she sent the manuscript to her publisher, the sky was pink. Not a dramatic, cinematic pink, just soft, blushing like it was embarrassed by its own gentleness. Rowan had left early for work. She taught creative writing part-time at a community college now, but she'd made breakfast before she went. Toast with strawberry jam, a banana sliced into perfect little coins. Melanie hadn't touched it. She just stared at the email attachment one last time. Title: The Quietest Girl in the Room. Author: Melanie Claire Rowe. She hit send. The silence afterward was deafening. For a moment she almost panicked, wanted to call it back to undo it all, but then the ping of her sent folder confirmed it had gone, and there was nothing left but the long, slow exhale that followed. She didn't expect a reply quickly. Editors moved like glaciers, but this one came within hours. The subject line simply read, "We need to talk." Her stomach dropped. She opened it. Melanie. I read it twice. This is the most honest thing you've ever written. We'll make room for it on the fall list, but I have one request. Don't use the Lark name. Let the world meet you. Dana! She stared at the screen. Dana had been her editor even before Lark Addison had a face. Back then, they'd only exchanged emails. Dana didn't know the color of her hair or the sound of her voice, but she knew her prose, her silences, her small, aching metaphors. Melanie reached for her tea. It was cold now, but she drank it anyway. 2 weeks later, the box arrived. Another one. She hesitated at first. Not every box brought comfort now. Some letters, those that had filtered in late, carried anger, disappointment, even betrayal. There were still people who believed she'd said those things in that interview. Some didn't care what the truth was. But this box was different. This box was wrapped in red string tied in a bow. Inside were 57 more letters. Some were in careful cursive, some on lined notebook paper barely legible. One was just a Polaroid of a girl standing in front of her school library, holding the fox and the falling tree with both hands and grinning like it weighed 10 pounds. Melanie sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded again by words she hadn't known were hers. Some were thank you notes, some were confessions. One was a poem, another a comic about a turtle who used books as armor. But tucked into the side of the box was something unexpected, a flash drive. No label, just a scrap of paper rubber-banded around it with the words, "From the kids." She plugged it into her laptop. It was a video. At first, just silence. Then a shaky camera, clearly in a school classroom. Then one by one, children began to speak. "My name is Amir. I used your book to write a song for my sister. I drew the fox with angel wings because my mum said stories live forever. I'm dyslexic, but I read your book by myself. It was the first one. You made me feel like maybe I'm not broken." The screen blurred in front of her eyes. She watched all 11 minutes of it. Twice. Then she called Rowan. She didn't speak for the first few seconds after she picked up. Just a soft intake of breath. Rowan didn't push her. Just waited. Finally, Melanie said, "I want to read some of these letters out loud. For the book tour." Rowan blinked. "Book tour? They want one? You haven't done one in—" "I know." A pause. Then Rowan said, "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Melanie nodded. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm willing." It was the first time in years she'd said yes to anything bigger than herself. She started small, a local library, 27 folding chairs, 12 filled. The microphone squeaked when she stepped up to the podium. She wore a plain black sweater, minimal makeup. Her hands shook so badly she had to grip the edge of the stand just to steady herself. She cleared her throat. "I'm Melanie Claire Rowe," she said. "You may have known me by another name, but that's not the name that matters today." She held up a letter, slightly wrinkled at the corners. "This is from a girl named Danny. She's 9, and she says—" Her voice cracked. "I didn't know books could hear me until yours did." A breath, a beat. The room fell still. She continued. Letter after letter, some short, some unbearably long. By the end, a woman in the back was crying openly. A man had his hand over his mouth. Melanie took a shaky bow, then stepped off stage. Rowan met her with a flask of water and a tight, brief hug. "You did it," she whispered. "Not yet," Melanie said. "But soon." What she didn't expect were the emails. Not from readers, those came too, but from authors, other writers, children's authors, teen poets, essayists, ghostwriters. Some had believed the smear. Some had even posted angry things about her during the scandal. But now, they reached out quietly, apologizing, admitting they'd jumped to conclusions. Some sent their own stories of being misunderstood. Others just sent small notes. "You made me want to write honestly again. I forgot that a book could save someone." One came from a man she'd never met, a YA author with millions of readers. "You probably don't remember, but 15 years ago you critiqued my messy, overdramatic manuscript at a workshop. You were the only one who said it had a soul. I just wanted you to know I never forgot that." She printed that one, taped it to her fridge, next to a crayon drawing of the fox now holding a pen. The book's release date approached. The publishers offered to rebrand her. New jacket photos, a podcast special, glossy interviews. She said no to all of it. "I just want the story to speak." "But people want to see the writer," her agent said. Then, They can come to the readings. And they did. Not in crowds, but steadily. One by one they came. Old fans, new readers, kids holding torn copies of Falling Tree, teens with tattoos of her words, grown men with grief in their eyes. Each time she read a letter, each time she said her name. Not Lark Addison, Melanie Rowe. And with each syllable she stepped a little further out of the shadow she'd built to survive. By September, the manuscript was everywhere. The quietest girl in the room hit shelves with no fanfare, no dramatic author photo, no tagline claiming from the best-selling author of just a single unadorned cover, a girl sitting in the corner of a classroom, head bent low, her shadow stretching behind her in the shape of a fox. Melanie hadn't approved that detail. But when she saw it, she smiled. Dana had known exactly what she wouldn't say out loud. What surprised Melanie most wasn't the reviews, it was the quiet way the book moved. Librarians ordered extra copies. Teachers read it aloud in classrooms. Therapists bought boxes to hand out to patients. A counselor at a youth shelter wrote a blog post that went viral. Finally, a book that doesn't treat quiet as a flaw. Melanie didn't reply to any of it, not at first. But she printed the blog post and folded it into her coat pocket. Carried it like a talisman. That. It wasn't until the reading in Minneapolis that things shifted again. The venue was a small auditorium, 50, maybe 60 people. It was a warm space, dim lighting, mismatched chairs. Someone had brought cookies. The smell of cinnamon drifted through the air. Rowan stood near the back arms, folded, watching. Melanie stepped up to the mic. Her hands no longer trembled when she spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was certain. "I want to share a letter today from a boy named Mason," she said. "He's 11. He wrote this last year." She unfolded the page. "Dear Melanie, I was the quietest kid in my class. My teacher said I lacked initiative. My mom said I needed to be braver, but your book made me think maybe I just needed time. I still don't talk much, but I started writing, and I'm better with paper than people. So thank you. I think you helped me find my voice, even if it's still small." She paused. "You know what I wish someone had told me when I was 11, she said quietly. "That a small voice still counts, that it's okay to speak in soft sentences, that you don't need to shout to be heard." Silence. Then applause, not thunderous but warm, sustained. Afterward, as she packed up her things, someone approached her. A woman in her 40s, brown curls tucked behind her ears, pale yellow cardigan. Holding a small hand in hers, a child maybe 6 years old with large eyes and a hesitant smile. "This is Cassie," the woman said. "She wants to give you something." Cassie stepped forward and handed Melanie a folded drawing. On it, a girl standing in a forest surrounded by speech bubbles. Some were empty. Some had hearts in them. The fox sat beside her, ears perked. Below it, "It's okay to take your time." Melanie crouched down. "Did you draw this?" Cassie nodded. "Did you like the story?" Cassie nodded again, then leaned in, whispering, "It made me feel like I wasn't the only one." Melanie's throat tightened. "Cassie," she said softly, "you're never the only one." That night in the hotel, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above her, listening to the city hum outside. Rowan lay beside her, fast asleep. They'd begun sharing rooms more often now. Sometimes just to talk late into the night. Sometimes because Rowan hated flying alone. Sometimes, like tonight, because the silences between them felt easier now. Safe, even. Melanie turned and looked at her. She remembered the way they used to laugh, loud, unself-conscious, tangled in blankets with half-finished stories on the floor. Back before publishers, before pen names, before shame. She reached over and gently brushed Rowan's hand. Rowan stirred, eyes opened. Melanie whispered, "Did you mean it? What you said? Back when you left?" Rowan blinked slowly. "Which part?" "That if I ever told the truth, you'd come back." Rowan shifted, propped herself up on an elbow. "I never really left," she said. "I was just waiting for you to remember how much of you there still was underneath Lark." Melanie swallowed. "I'm scared," she said. "Of what?" "That this peace won't last. That people will change their minds. That something else will go viral and make it all crash down again." Rowan reached for her hand. "Then let it crash," she said. "But this time, don't go down alone." A month later, the book hit the New York Times list. She found out while watering a wilted fern in her kitchen. The email simply read, "You're number 6. Congratulations. Dana." She stared at the screen for a long time, then whispered, "Okay." No dance, no tears, just that. "Okay." She turned back to the plant. It still looked half dead, but she watered it anyway. At the final stop of the tour, Seattle, a rainy Thursday afternoon, Melanie did something she hadn't planned. After reading a few letters, she paused. "There's one more I'd like to share," she said, "but it's not from a child." The room leaned in. She held up a page, old, slightly yellowed at the edges. "This letter is from a friend I lost once. She found me again when I didn't think I was worth finding." She glanced at Rowan in the front row, then read, "Mel, you always said you were better at stories than at living, but I think they're the same thing. You wrote about a fox that couldn't speak until someone listened. So now I'm listening. Say what you need. I'll be here when you do. Ah." She folded the letter gently. "I never replied," she said, "but this book was my reply." The room was silent, still, and then soft applause. Not polite, not mechanical, just grateful. Afterward, a man in his 20s approached her, nervous, fidgeting with the sleeve of his jacket. "Your book," he said. "I read it in one sitting. I was the quiet kid, too. I never thought anyone would write a story that felt like me." She smiled. He hesitated. "Then," asked, "will there be another?" She considered, then said yes, "but I don't think it'll be about a fox this time." He grinned. Before he left, he turned back and said, "Your real name is a good name." And she didn't cry. Not then. But later, back at the hotel, when she saw her name, Melanie Claire Rowe, engraved on a plaque beside the event hall door, she allowed herself the smallest, simplest truth. She had survived being invisible, and now she had been seen. The book's paperback edition arrived with a different cover. This time, the girl wasn't in a corner. She stood at the center of the page, facing forward, her hair messy, her shoes untied, and her eyes wide open. The fox was behind her, not guarding her, just walking beside her. Melanie hadn't asked for the change, but she approved it without edits. She was learning to let things evolve. The house was quieter now, but no longer sad. The windows stayed open in the morning. Oatmeal had a perch by the sill again. The couch was still messy, but the clutter was softer now. Postcards from readers, folded blankets, tea mugs with actual tea still warm inside. The old fear, the dread that another misquote, another scandal, another misplaced word could unravel, everything hadn't disappeared. But it no longer owned her, because now she had proof in the form of 200 letters, and counting. One day a package arrived. No name, no stamp, just a neatly wrapped box and a note. "For the one who found us first," inside a collage. Hundreds of tiny faces, photos clipped from school portraits, art projects, drawings, fan letters, all arranged around a single sentence in gold ink. "You made quiet feel brave." She hung it above her desk, not out of pride, out of gratitude. It reminded her who she was writing for now. She started the next book in a cafe downtown. Rowan sat across from her grading papers with a pencil that always chewed at the eraser. The window beside them fogged with breath and the smell of roasted coffee beans. Melanie's fingers danced across the keys with slow, certain rhythm. This book was different. It wasn't autobiographical, not entirely, but it followed a girl who made stories out of silence, who lost her way behind a name that didn't belong to her, who found it again when someone reminded her that her truest voice didn't need to be loud, just honest. "New fox?" Rowan asked, glancing at the screen. Melanie shook her head. "No fox this time." Rowan raised an eyebrow. Melanie smiled. "But there is a wolf, and she doesn't run." The final letter she read months after the book had left the bestseller list, after the tour had ended, after the noise had faded, came from a girl named Anais, 10 years old. It was written in purple glitter pen. The envelope was sealed with a unicorn sticker. Melanie opened it, sitting on the porch, knees tucked under her sweater sleeves rolled past her wrists. "Dear Melanie, I never liked to read until my teacher said I had to. I picked your book because the cover was quiet, and I'm quiet too. I used to think quiet meant boring or wrong, but now I think it just means not finished yet. I'm not finished. Thank you for waiting for me. Melanie placed the letter on her lap, folded her arms and closed her eyes. Not finished yet. It echoed in her chest like music. She looked out over the yard leaves turning late afternoon gold, washing over everything. Oatmeal poured at a beetle on the porch steps. The wind shifted. She thought of the early days, of rejection letters, of fake names, of podcasts and headlines, and the cold grey walls of shame. She thought of Rowan's voice steadying her when her own had vanished. She thought of children who had folded their fears into letters and mailed them to a stranger. And then she thought of one last moment she hadn't shared with anyone. The day before she mailed her final draft, before she had even told Rowan it was finished, Melanie stood at her old writing desk, the one with the warped leg and ink-stained drawers. She pulled out a yellowing envelope. Inside, the first sketch of the fox, drawn by Rowan back in college on a napkin from their favorite diner. She stared at it for a long time, then wrote on the back, "Thank you for helping me tell the truth." She placed it in a new envelope and tucked it into the back of the book's final draft folder. Not for publishing, not for anyone else, just to remember where it all began and who stood beside her when she forgot how to finish the sentence. Epilogue, a classroom somewhere. A teacher reads aloud from a book. The room is full of 10-year-olds, some doodling, some listening with their heads tilted, some with arms crossed, but still watching. The teacher's voice is soft but steady, and the quiet girl sat on the floor, not because she was hiding, but because the room was too loud for her thoughts. She waited, she breathed, and when it was her turn to speak, she said just one sentence, and that was enough. In the back of the room, a girl lifts her hand slowly. "I like her," she says. The teacher smiles. "Why?" The girl shrugs. "She's like me." The bell rings. The children gather their things, and the teacher places the book back on the shelf next to the fox and the falling tree, and above it a new label, "Books That Help You Breathe." Sometimes the quietest people are holding the loudest stories. They don't always shout. They don't always post. But when they speak even softly, it can change someone's life. Have you ever been saved by a story or written something that helped someone else? Tell us in the comments. And if this story made you pause, breathe a little deeper, or feel a little less alone, we hope you'll like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We share stories like this every week. Thanks for staying till the end. We'll see you in the next one.